History 102, Lecture 8, World War II, Holocaust Part 2. So the next thing we want to talk about is, so we talked about, we looked at, we're looking at academics, then we talked about Holocaust revisionist arguments. So now we want to dive into the primary documents, the history. When you read Holocaust revisionist literature, the focus of Holocaust revisionist literature is on the 1930s. German government policy in the 1930s. And if you do not have an academic understanding of the Holocaust, you get into trouble really quick, because Holocaust revisionists are correct when they argue that in the 1930s, German government policy wasn't extermination, it was emigration. The goal of the German government in the 1930s was to discriminate against the Jewish population enough that they would leave Germany. They'd get out. Okay. And so if you don't have an academic understanding, you get scared. You're like, oh no, I might have to be socially unacceptable and think Holocaust didn't happen. Because these Holocaust revisions are proving it to me. And so that's why it's important to know the academics, to get in and talk about it, so you can have a better understanding of the academics. It is true, in the 1930s, German government policy was to discriminate against the Jewish population enough that they were going to leave, that they'd leave Germany. What is our evidence of that? Okay. Well, let's look at, this is a list. Why are you, there you go. The screen hadn't moved. Let's look at a list here. This is a list of German government policies during the 1930s that demonstrate this idea that the goal was to discriminate and get Jews to leave. Okay. In April 1933, we see the first, you might say, anti-Jewish government action. National Socialists under Chancellor Adolf Hitler took power in January of 1933. So this is a couple of months later. We see the first state-sponsored attempt by the German government. In April 1933, the German government called for a boycott of Jewish businesses. And so it'd be like if the U.S. government came out and said, don't shop at stores owned by people named John, or whatever. So it's like that. The government actually comes out and advertises and says, don't shop at Jewish businesses. Okay. So give you our society, it'd be like if the president came out and signed an executive order, don't shop at Jewish businesses. He said, don't shop at Jewish businesses, or don't shop at stores of people named Sean or whatever. And so you have a targeted population to boycott them. During the 1930s, so as National Socialism took power in Germany, what you see is a subversion or a creation of a parallel society. National Socialism always had a parallel organization that then took over the institution. For example, Boy Scouts of America, Hitler Youth. If you're a member of a German labor union, there was the Labor Front, the National Socialist Labor Union, that took over. Okay, and so what you found is, as National Socialism took over German society, Jews are pushed out. So, for example, like, say, Boy Scouts of America. Boy Scouts of America allows Jews in their Cub Scouts, whatever. Well, Hitler Youth, they don't allow Jews, so Hitler Youth takes over, and the government says, well, no, you want to join a youth movement, you don't join Boy Scouts of America, you join Hitler Youth. Well, so what you do is, as Boy Scouts of America disappears and becomes Hitler Youth organizations, oh, well, we don't allow Jews, so Jews slowly get pushed out. If you're a Jewish worker and your union disappears or your union gets absorbed into the National Labor Front, which was the name of the National Socialist Labor Union was called the Labor Front. Labor Front, National Labor Front. So they take over. Well, sorry, Jews can't be a part of the National Socialist Labor Union, so you're out. Jewish professors would find themselves fired. So let's say this is the 1930s, and I was a Jewish instructor. I would find myself increasingly marginalized. I wouldn't get tenure. I'd get fired eventually. Okay. Same thing for Jewish scientists, Jewish writers, like Jewish musicians. All of a sudden, Jewish musicians, we're not gonna play your music anymore. If you're a Jewish playwright or a Jewish author, the publishing company says, well, we're not going to publish Jewish authors anymore. As National Socialism takes over, Jewish people find themselves increasingly marginalized. And so you find yourself increasingly marginalized in society. Like I said a minute ago, the German government even sets up a process by which Jews can leave Germany. You have to leave all your property and money, but you yourself can leave. And so, in the 1930s at Berlin Olympics, what's interesting about this is you actually see the German government tamp down, kind of quiet down the anti-Jewish rhetoric around the time of the Berlin Olympics because the world was watching. The Olympic Committee had given Berlin the Olympics before National Socialists had taken over. And so, it was done deal. And that gives you another thing about, like some people go, well, didn't people know how bad Hitler was? And that's kind of the other thing to think about. In the 1930s, like Germans who lived in the 1930s call the 1930s the good times. Okay? The period from 33, the period of 1933 to, say, 1940 are called the good times. Okay? People in the early 1930s, like, I think all of you expect, all of us today, I guess, expect, like Hitler is so obviously evil, everyone would say it, and everyone, oh my gosh, and so, a lot of it's shady, or a lot of it's like, shade is not obviously evil, kind of a thing, I guess. And again, remember I told you in an earlier lecture, people didn't take Hitler serious. When Hitler talked about the final solution, vocally, and National Socialist candidates did, people were like, oh, well, it's just rhetoric. We don't like Jews either. What? Come on. So, we think, well, why would they let Hitler have the Olympics? Because he hadn't started any major wars yet. He hadn't started, and so, it was just rhetoric at that point, I guess you could say. 1936 to 38, you have the development of race laws meant to purify the German population. Interestingly enough, so the Berlin Olympics, summer of 1936, when did the German government start instituting its race laws? The fall of 1936. Kind of interesting. Once the world dies aren't watching, you institute racial laws. As evidence that extermination wasn't necessarily the initial issue or desire or goal, the German government actually explored rounding up its Jewish population and sending it to the island of Madagascar in Africa. Okay? A lot of students don't know this and are shocked. Chancellor Hitler was an early supporter of a Jewish state in Israel. Early on, when Zionism, when the idea that Jewish people should have a homeland in their ancestral homeland in the Middle East, Chancellor Hitler was actually an early supporter of it. Why? It would get rid of the Jews. So this is evidence that, early on, the German government policy is emigration. So anything that physically gets rid of Jews, move somewhere else, is fine. He'll change that during World War II. Chancellor Hitler will change his attitude during World War II. He needed Arab support for his attempts to take over North Africa, and Arabs didn't want a Jewish national state. One little known fact you're not told: the Arab leader in Jerusalem in the 30s, early 40s, was a supporter of Chancellor Hitler. Mainly because they viewed Hitler as, he would, take care of the Jewish problem, and so we see Adolf Hitler actually kind of changing his mind in later years. It would concentrate Jewish power in a homeland, and so also as Hitler's trying to get support as the war goes on, kind of a little known fact that most people don't want you to know is the Arab leader in Jerusalem during those years that was a supporter of Hitler for a while, Chancellor of Hitler. And then German government supported European youth efforts to accept Jewish refugees. We wanted them out. So, another thing we need to do to help us understand the academics of the Holocaust and German government is understanding the different parts of the German government. So you have the Wehrmacht, which is the German armed forces. You have the SS. The SS is the government security force, intelligences, and here's the kicker. There's what a lot of students don't really know. So the concentration camp system is an SS program or SS thing. Okay, the SS ran the concentration camp system, and then you have the Gestapo, which is the state or national police. Another way to look at it's not exactly correct. It roughly, the SS would be like the CIA, Gestapo would be like the FBI. So, I'm not in comparing them. I'm not saying that's exactly the same, but it would be kind of similar. If the U.S. was a national socialist state like Germany, and the SS would be the CIA, the Gestapo would be the FBI. So, but anyways, but I'm not making present day comparison. I'm not saying the FBI is the Gestapo today. Some of you are going to think that, but anyways. Okay, so now we got to get to World War II. Okay. So, based on the primary documents, the evidence seems to indicate when you study the Holocaust and you read the documents, the Holocaust happening as early as the summer of 1941 with the invasion of Russia, and as late as the winter spring of 1942, the 1C conference, which we'll talk about later on, it becomes official German government policy to exterminate the Jewish population in Europe. And so, when you get into the academics, when historians study the academics, they focus on that period. The invasion of Russia in June of 1941 to early 1942. If the Holocaust happened, if it becomes German government policy, to official German government policy, it's in this era. It's in that window. Okay, it's in that window of the summer of 41 to early 42, where we would see the best evidence of German government policy becoming, we need to enact the final solution of the Jewish question in Europe. Okay. So the main evidence, Einsatzgruppen, 1C conference, and a couple of other things. So the Wehrmacht of the SS. So this is indirect evidence, but it is interesting to discuss. So June of 1941, the German military invades the Soviet Union. Okay. When you study those early months of the invasion, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, you do see orders coming from the German government, the civilian government in Berlin, for German officers to carry out, round up and carry out executions of people that we don't like. And it's not just Jews, it's communists, resistors, intellectuals, Polish intellectuals we don't like. And what you see is, what's interesting is, you see a lot of German generals and officers refusing to participate in what they think is a political objective. And so that's kind of your first example or evidence indirectly of the German government attempting to achieve a political end. The political end is the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe. And again, why do I keep saying that? Because that is a term that's used. When you read the primary documents, you can read German primary documents during this period. They talk, it's in document, they talk about the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe. Okay, and that's why I kind of bored you in the last video a little bit by going into detail on that. When a National Socialist says final solution, what their meaning is, listen fellow Europeans, we've been trying to get rid of Jews for 1,500 years. We've tried everything. Exile, forced conversion, immigration, segregation, ghettoization, discrimination. They're still here. What have we not tried? Getting rid of them, exterminating the population. And so this is kind of it's a clue. When you study the primary documents, you see phrases. You see this phrase, the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe. And correct, it's not explicit, hey, we're going to kill all the Jews. Okay. But if you understand National Socialist ideology, National Socialist language, you know when a National Socialist says we're going to enact the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe, that's clear. Okay. And so you see that in documents. And you see German officers and generals refusing to enact the final solution. Because from the military's point of view, the final solution, enacting the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe, is a political aim, is a political objective. Where you regularly find the German officers going, listen, you, National Socialist government, you ordered us into a war, okay? You ordered us into a war against, France, England, and now the Soviet Union. Okay, so we have one objective: beat the Russians. We're not worrying about all this other stuff. You can read primary documents of German officers going, wait till after the war for your political objectives. You have given us a military objective: defeat the Russian army, which is massive, by the way. I'll give you an idea. I'll give you one historian studied the amount of men over the course of the war, 1941 to 45. 41 to 45. Okay. 1941 to 45. The Russian army, okay, the Russian military was able to put out on the battlefield, not all at once, but over the course of the war, was able to put into the battlefield 600 divisions. A division ranging from 10 to 15,000 men. Okay. By contrast, between 41 to 45 in the Eastern Theater, the German military put around 60. And the German military knows that. The German military knows. Okay, they're like, you've got us into a war with a behemoth. The Russians are limitless. And that's to prove that. Okay. That's why when you study World War II, and there are some battles where 1 million Russians surrendered, and they're still in the war. Okay, think about that for a minute. There are battles where the Germans defeated and got a million Russian soldiers to surrender, and it didn't end the war. You captured a million people, a million enemy soldiers, and they're still fighting. Okay, I mean, so the German military, when you study the primary document, the German officers and military men, they're like, we're fighting a war. We're not doing all these political objectives. Okay, and so you can read that. As the war was getting to an end, the German government was giving resources to the SS to carry out the final solution, causing upset of military officers. Okay. The Wannsee Conference is the best primary document evidence of an attempt to have as government policy to exterminate the Jewish population in Europe. From the primary documents, we learn in the summer of 1941, as the German military was invading Russia, Hermann Goering, a top National Socialist Party member. Goering was also head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. He ordered SS General Reinhard Heydrich to develop a plan to enact or solve the final solution. The Wannsee Conference occurred on January 20, 1942. Wannsee is a suburb of Berlin. So you have a bunch of government officials meeting in Wannsee, Germany, near Berlin. The minutes of the meeting survived the war. And that's how we know. How do we know about the Wannsee Conference? Because Russian, American, British, French, Russian generally, but soldiers, American, Russian, British, French soldiers, when they were scouring Germany, they were looking for evidence. Okay? One thing that a lot of students don't know about is as the war was ending, German government workers burned a lot of documents. A lot of things were burned. Okay? So when Holocaust revisionists talk about lack of evidence, part of that is because as the war was ending, the German government, like bureaucrats, government workers, just started burning everything. And so we're lucky to have the Wannsee Conference. This is the best evidence it's about the only one, really. I mean, to talk directly about enacting the final solution. It survives the war, and in the minutes of this meeting, you have Reinhard Heydrich discussing enacting the final solution, coordinating the final solution. What's interesting about this is how bureaucratic the final solution is. When you say the final solution, it's bureaucratic, it's banal, B-N-A-L, it's boring almost. When you think about how bureaucratic it was. This is an example of the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy got together and decided, we're going to enact this policy. Okay, let's get it going. So you have the organization. Okay. Another evidence point for historians is that there's no debate on the final solution. No one in the minutes goes, what is the final solution? There's no argument about it. What you see is, from the primary document, when, again, like I've said, when a National Socialist says, we're going to enact the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe, or we're going to solve the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe, I mean, you're not talking about immigration at that point. Why? Because you've already tried it. You get it? You're not talking about immigration. You've already tried it. The Jews are still here. You're not talking about exiling Jews. You've tried it. Europe. For 1,500 years, the Jews are still here. You're not talking about discrimination anymore. Because you've done it. You've already done it, and the Jews are still here. Okay? What you have not tried is extermination. You haven't done that. Next, you have Einsteinsgruppen. when you study the primary documents, you don't, and this is what throws, if you don't have an academic education in the Holocaust, this throws you as a student. The death camps, Auschwitz and all that, they didn't exist. Auschwitz didn't exist in 1933, 36, or 39. Okay, you don't see death camps immediately. Okay, and so if you don't have an academic education, that looks like evidence the Holocaust didn't happen. You don't see these death camps until later, after the invasion of Russia, and so I can throw you. And so when you study the Holocaust, what you have to look for is, and what historians look for, is radicalization or development of the final solution. When you study the final solution of the Holocaust, when you study the academic evidence, what you see is a bureaucratic development or radicalization, that goes from one level to the next until by 1942 you are trying to, the famous, gas and burn Jews to death. Einsatzgruppen is an example of an early attempt. What the Einsatzgruppen is German for deployment group. Okay. So that's what it means. So deployment group. It's made up of SS. It's the SS. What the SS would do is they would gather regular Germans, police officers, anyone. If you were a German male and you couldn't serve in the military, you can join one of these Einsatzgruppen, these deployment groups. Okay. What these Einsatzgruppen do, your deployment group, you would follow the German army. So as the Wehrmacht is fighting the Russians, pushing east, the Einsatzgruppen move into an area, say a village. Let's say the German military was fighting, and the German military took a village, and then the German military has moved on. The Einsatzgruppen would come in, a couple days later, and you would round up everyone, and then you'd sort them out. Desirable people, undesirable people. Are they resistance fighters? Are they communists? Are they Jewish? Are they intellectuals? You got to get rid of them. You got to shoot them. Okay. And then what you do is then you get rid of. You have the people you want to kill. You have them dig a grave, and then a large hole, large grave, and then you line them up and you shoot them into it. Okay. And so you have an early attempt, and you study the final solution. You can see an attempt, like, okay, well, we're in the middle of a war. How through this war, how can we enact the final solution to the Jewish question in Europe? Well, we see the first answer being, well, we'll just shoot them. Because then what can you say after the war? What can you say? Well, what Holocaust revisionists say today. That any Jews dead are just from the war. I mean, war kills a lot of people. Okay? So you see that's the exact thing that happens is if, we have war happening, so anyone we shoot, the justification would be, well, it was war. I mean, war is hell. So, which, interestingly enough, is a Holocaust revision argument. So, interesting point about the Einsatzgruppen. And after the war, you heard a lot of Germans say, we had to do what the Nazis had because they'd shoot us. So you see a lot of that after the war, like, we were forced to. No one actually liked Hitler. Which is funny, because I've already told you, Germans that remember the 1930s call it the good times. So, some people liked Hitler. Okay. But after the war, no one actually likes Hitler. Okay. Anyways, and so, evidence contrary to that is this. When you study these Einsatzgruppen, when you study the primary documents, what they show is Einsatzgruppen commanders willingly reassigned soldiers tired of murdering people. If you got tired of shooting men, women, and children 8 hours a day, you could go to your Einsatzgruppen commander and say, I want to shoot. I want to do something else, and they would do it. There's little to no primary document records of an Einsatzgruppen soldier or SS member being disciplined for not following order, or not wanting to shoot or do something. What happened is, when you read the primary documents, what happened is the commander just reassigned them. Go guard the trucks, or go guard those people over there. And you'd have, there's that. Interestingly enough, mass shooting everyone, that's actually inefficient. It takes a long time. Also, do you need those bullets, the bullets you're shooting people you don't like? Are those bullets needed somewhere else? Yes, you're in the middle of a war. Those bullets need to go for, need to shoot Russians, not people you don't like. And so, Russian soldiers. And so what we see here is the bureaucracy moving on from Einsatzgruppen, because these Einsatzgruppen groups, it's inefficient. It takes way to shoot, to have 1,000 people dig a grave, shoot them into it, and then bury that grave. That takes a while. That's inefficient. It takes too long. So when you study the final solution, when you study all this, what you do is, when you read the primary documents, you look for developments. Okay. Yes, death camps didn't just come out first. Yes, that's correct. That's what you got to do. Holocaust revisionist arguments aren't 100% false or wrong. Okay, I mean, you just got to deal with that. Okay, just that. Okay. So what you got to do is you got to look for evidence to support your point of view, and you see that when you study the evolution or radicalization of German government policy. The next step after these Einsatzgruppen, you had gas fans. What the SS started doing was they'd round up people, the group they didn't like. They put you in the back of a van, like a semi. They would attach a hose from the exhaust into the cab in the back, and they'd drive for several hours. Well, if you're inside the semi, what's that going to do? All the exhaust? It's going to asphyxiate you, right? And so you see an evolution. Sorry, I should have paused, but oh well. The other thing you need to understand academically is you've got to understand how the concentration camp system worked. Okay. Sometimes in your emotional education, you get the idea that every camp was a death camp, and they're all the same, and that's not correct. You need to have an understanding of the different kinds of concentration camp. It was a system ran by the SS. Okay? There were different types of camps for different reasons. Okay? You had a regular concentration camp, which is a prison. The most famous example is Oranienburg. It was actually the first one open, March of 1933. March of 1933, the National Socialist government had called for elections. Guess what the National Socialist government did right before the elections in March 1933? They rounded up and threw in jail all their political opponents. Interesting. The National Socialist government rounded up all their political opponents and put them in prison. Oranienburg, I may be pronouncing that wrong, I don't speak German, but Oranienburg, March of 1933. And that's the thing. It wasn't a death camp. It was a prison. It was jail. So I mean, you have, and so right before parliamentary election, March 1933, the German government, we're going to throw all our political opponents in jail. Right? It is interesting to note that even in a partially rigged election, National Socialists only won 40% of the popular vote. So for the argument that people did not support National Socialism, that was actually an argument. In March of 1933, the National Socialist government had a parliamentary election, a partially rigged election where they threw their political opponents in jail. They still only got 40% of the vote. It was enough to win, because in Parliament you don't go by popular vote, you go by seats in the Reichstag. But that is interesting. It is, it is true. Yes, not everyone supported Hitler. March 1933, they rigged an election, partially rigged it, and still only won 40% of the vote. So that's actually an argument for, we didn't like that one really. I mean, so, like if I'm going to rig an election, I'm getting 100%. Anyways, so a partially rigged election, and you still only get 40%. Which, by the way, is about the amount you got when you look at elections in 1932 and 31, that's about what you were getting too. Like the National Socialist popular vote for the Reichstag in 1930, 31, 32 was around 40%. So you got it? A rigged election, and you still only get about kind of what you've been getting. So that's kind of another funny thing is, that is true that, but anyways, I'm getting off topic, but it's kind of funny to think about. You have transit camps. You have forced labor camps. So what would happen is, let's say I'm a factory owner in Germany during the war, and I need workers, because all my workers are off fighting the war. I need workers. What the German government would do would round up people, Jews, Russians, other people, bring them to a forced labor camp, and if I was a German factory worker or factory owner, you would be my labor. So here would be my factory, and here would be the labor camp right next door. That would be my labor. So what's kind of funny is there are companies in Germany that existed in World War II that still exist today. And they don't like to talk about, 1933 to 1945, because some of them used forced labor. It was how you got your workers during the war. POW camps, you capture English, British, American soldiers. And then you have the extermination camps, all in Poland, and there's 6 of them. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I'll finish up the Holocaust part in the next video.